Damn weather. We've been in some, yes.
All right.
Cherry ground tomatoes and ground cherries. You know what they are?
Yeah, I've heard of it.
Is that so?
Yeah.
There is.
Well, no, the bell choir.
It's like this week will take.
Well, I have really excited.
Yeah.
So
I think the choir should be.
he's holding
I think we have a few in the bell choir. They may come out.
Times it went out there.
This is Ron Bell and
Few it off.
last Sunday.
I did.
Yeah, he's retired from this. Wow, it's happened over the front porch party. It's not somebody waiting. Right. And man.
But I make sure it's perfect.
Good morning, MJ. Welcome aboard. Okay, you ready to get started?
Let's go.
I've been sitting here and I've been talking to Ray and Daryl, and I'm thinking if I would just let this go, we talk all morning.
Of course. That's what we do.
Yeah, if you want to. Yeah, I let it go a little bit longer. I was hoping some people from the bell choir would come.
Oh, it's up there.
And maybe they're still practicing, they might come in later. But we're going to keep going with the translation comparisons that we had in Matthew 16. And what I want to do with this is maybe not jump ahead, but move a little bit quicker. So we've looked at the Greek, and then we've looked at the King James Version, New RSV updated, NIV, CEV. So we really have yet to do the New Living Translation, the Contemporary English Bible, and the Message. And this is good because these are thought for thought translations, and then the Message is a paraphrase. So instead of just doing those one at a time, I'd like to do those maybe a phrase at a time. So let's go over the Greek one more time. Then Jesus said to his disciples, and most translations are going to say something to that effect. Then we have this indefinite pronoun with a conjunctive. So you can translate it as whoever or if anyone. If anyone desires to follow me. No, if anyone desires to come after me, let him deny himself, let him take up his cross, let him follow. So we work at that with the other translations. Now, let's see what these three translations do. The last three. New Living Translation, Contemporary English Version, that's what CEV means, and then of course the Message by E.G. Peterson, the paraphrase. The first phrase isn't much different. Then Jesus said to his disciples, then Jesus said to his disciples. Now, you may remember when we first hand this handout, he went right to the Message. And it says, then Jesus went to work. Remember that?
Yeah.
Work on his disciples. Well, what does that mean? That's not what the Greek says. So if you read the rest of the passage, I think it might give us a clue. What is Peterson trying to do here when he says, instead of saying, then Jesus said to his disciples, he says, then Jesus went to work on his disciples.
Well, I think it's the one you're thinking work on is to educate his disciples into the broader contents and what he really needs for them to do.
Yeah. Okay.
And sort of emphasize, this is what I want, you know.
It's more of a directive or a challenge.
Yeah, I thought, that's how I took it, that more of it's a talent. Yeah, I mean, you're gonna work on someone, like I say, I'm gonna work on my son, stepson. Okay, I mean, I'm gonna. Yeah.
Knowing like it is.
Tell it like it is, or say, hey, look, you know, do this, you do a better job with that, or just whatever. Or, you know what it's like, you've gone to work on other people, or maybe people have gone to work on you. So, we don't mean to make a big deal of this, but this is what Peterson did, it's not, with the Greek itself in that phrase, but I think what it's doing is he's bringing in more of the, content in its context, the content of the rest of the verse, by saying, hey, this is, Jesus is, he's not just saying hello to the disciples. He's going to work. All right, enough of that. Now, the next phrase is in the Greek, whoever desires to come after me. What the NLT does, that's kind of an indirect address. We call it third person address. If someone or anyone wants to come after me, talking indirect. NLT and the CEV, they change it to direct address. Instead of if anyone, says if any of you. See the difference? Because if I say if anyone, this person wants to come after Jesus or after me, that's kind of a indirect, what we call third person address, but what they're doing is they're saying you and later on in the next phrases, if they stick with that, it's going to be more inclusive instead of just mass single. We'll get to it, but that change is made. The next thing we have here, they both the NLT and CEV change the verb to a noun. So if anyone desires to come after me, that's the verb. If anyone desires, come after me. But then they substitute the noun. If any of you wants to be my follower, or if any of you want to be my follower. So they're substituting a noun verb. To come after me, it could mean just, we've talked about this, it could mean to come after me after I'm gone. But when you put the word follower in there, we can follow Jesus after he's been gone, but this seems to say that if anyone wants to be my follower, so it's almost contemporary. So I thought that was curious. Substitute this noun verb. So what that's doing is clearing up what they think to come after me means. Doesn't mean, well, to come after me once I'm gone, just to walk after me. If you want to be a follower, you want to. Any thoughts on that? Okay. And then what does the message do? Anyone who intends to come with me. And I'm going to stop there with that. Now, the next one is, so Jesus says to his disciples, whoever wants to come after me, let him deny himself. That's what the Greek says. What does the NLT say?
Give up your ways.
You, see, remember, they stick to that direct address to you. You must give up your own way. So they're beginning to tell you what they think deny yourself means. I mean, what does that mean? Just when you first read that, I mean, I think we have to think about that. What does deny myself? You have to let him deny himself. We have to think about what that means. At least I do. It's not readily apparent. It's not something I talk about a lot. I know this verse from biblical Bible, but don't go around and say, well, I'm going to deny myself to faith and try to do a better job, better. So it's almost like that. You always have to go to the commentary to figure out what that means. And in a sense, maybe they're doing a little bit of commentary work, but because give up your own way, that's not in the Greek. So, and then, the CEV says, you must forget about yourself. So to deny yourself, according to the NLT, means you must, give up your way. And the contemporary English version says you must forget about yourself. And then the Message says you have to let me lead. I'm in the driver's seat, not you. So Jesus has the steering wheel. We're in the passenger seat. Did I get that right? I think so. Yeah. You're not in the driver's seat. I am. So, thoughts on that? What does it mean to deny oneself? You need to forget about yourself. And, you know, we don't want to forget about ourselves totally, we have to. But forget about ourselves, give up our own way. Don't let ourselves get in the way. It's one way to look at that. But to give up our own agenda, to give up our own ways of doing things, especially if they're in contradistinction to what Jesus wanted.
In sports, the players take the direction from the coach. They don't decide. You don't decide whether you're going to play or not. The coach, it's the coach's call.
Yeah. Well, if you have a hot dog, then there's going to be, or a show off, and there's going to be some tension between the coach and
That's it. Essentially, they have to deny themselves to let the coach.
that's right, yeah. And just can't go off our own cowboy on the basketball. Coach said, we're gonna run this play, let's run this play. The coach says, pass the ball, and ball. Taking 10 3-pointers in a row. Sticking with the basketball analogy.
Well, sadly, our leader in the country, he's after me.
Yeah, I would,
Well, I mean, thinks he's God.
well,
Yeah.
okay,
With a low G, very low G. Well, yeah,
well,
I
yeah,
mean, that's a extreme point.
yeah. Sure,
The coming at translation and paraphrase, I find myself thinking, yeah, I'm gonna put some words in there, dealing with, forget about yourself, meaning, judgment, control. Is that a paraphrase? I mean, right here, right now, I begin thinking about, and so what we discuss in here, is it really a translation?
right,
Or each of us doing a paraphrase, trying to understand the connection in that phrase?
well, I think we almost, I started off by saying to me, it's not apparent readily what to deny myself means. So if we're going, now, we can stick with the Greek say deny myself, then we can go to the commentaries and say, see what they say. And so that way your translation is sticking to the Greek with something that's not unclear, it's ambiguous. But then we then we go away from we step aside from the text and we interpret. So what the thought for thought translations are doing, they're starting to interpret that within the translation. And then the paraphrase goes a little bit further. So I think these two thought for thoughts translations are bordering on a paraphrase. And there's a reason why they're doing that, because to make it make sense, because a thought for thought translation is not so much concerned with the Greek vocabulary or the Greek word order and the grammatical structure, but they're more concerned with modern day expressions. So trying to put this, because again, I don't think we go around today saying we're going to deny ourselves. So what does that mean? And so they're trying to put some kind of interpretation into the translation. You must forget about yourself. You must give up your own way. Keep forgetting what that is. Yeah, you must give up your own way. Or as Peterson says, you have to let Jesus be in the driver's seat. You ride shotgun and you follow. This is how you follow Jesus, which is in the end. Let him deny himself, take up his cross, let him follow.
I just think of Ray's illustration
Yeah.
here of the coach and the player. When the rubber hits the road, the ball is in your hand, and we got to decide: do I do what the coach told me to do,
Yeah,
or do I do what?
which is Jesus.
Yeah.
That's the analogy.
The other thing I was thinking along those lines is deny yourself and deny. To me, the innate, and I think I get confused with Hindu ego, our ego that we're supreme, we want this, we want that.
Mhm.
Deny ourselves of being that way. And look out to what can we do for our community. Like I went to the interfaith thing yesterday and it was on resilience, but a lot of it spoke about community. And how the community, helps with resilience.
Right. So, and I think we learned this from some of Jesus' teachings, is that, yeah, we can't always do it on our own or our own way. It helps to get together with other people who are following Jesus. Sometimes you're more effective working with other people than just trying to do it after them.
It's like the phrase, takes a village to raise a child.
So we start with let him deny himself, and then we come to working together, notion of the village, and all that's not in, and this is where you ultimately want to go. When you come to the scripture, you read the translation, and we do to some degree want the translation to reflect the source language. But then at some point, that's an academic exercise. So at some point, we want to apply it to life today, 2,000 years later. And that's what I want to do next with this class. Because we talked about, I almost went 2 years without using the word exegesis. Has anyone heard the word exegesis before? Yeah. And how many people know what that word means? So we use it, but it's a technical biblical studies word. It's a seminary word, and so I was very careful not to use that word exegesis. We've been doing exegesis for two years. So what I wanna do next, after I get done with these two verses here, is I wanna, go over the elements and the steps of exegesis, because in biblical studies, it's a discipline. But so you have these, not that you have to go through it step by step, but when you come to a passage and you wanna learn more about it, then you'll have some tools in your tool belt. You already have them, but we're gonna put them in more of a checklist or step-by-step thing. I think that might be something. So, we'll see that, but and I get into that to say that's the goal of exegesis is interpretation, life application of the passage. Yeah, you wanna learn about the history of, you wanna know, the literary genre of the text, what you're dealing with, and you can do that very quickly sometimes. Might take 5 minutes to determine what literary form or genre we're working with here, and does that matter or not? It may not matter, and then you go on, but at the end of our Bible study or exegetical method, we want to, have some kind of life application. So we're actually doing that here with these translations. We're trying to figure out what it means to deny oneself. So the next one, now, the two thought for thought translations, they really don't go after this. The next one is, let him take up his cross and follow me. Well, take up your cross, NLT. CEV says, take up your cross. Now, the message, don't run from suffering, embrace it. And if I think, again, take up your cross, that's not to me, what that means doesn't readily come. Now, after years of preaching on it and working with it, I think I know what it means. Taking up my cross means I have to follow Jesus, and it might cost me something. So when I hear that, but if I can think back and remember the first time I ever read this, which I can't, but I'm sure it didn't make any sense. What does it mean? And to understand what take up one's cross means, you have to understand the the overall context of the Jesus story, because you're taking up our cross. Jesus has his cross. Well, apparently he's telling us we have our own cross. We take up our cross and we follow it. And so does that readily bring a message to you, or is that something we have to work at? Now, the NLT and the CEV really didn't go after it, but Peterson did. He said, well, don't run from suffering, embrace it. So if I'm following Jesus, if I'm taking up my cross to follow Jesus, and like I said, it might cost me something, and if it does, and I find myself in some kind of suffering because I'm trying to live out the lifestyle Christ would want me to live, then I need to embrace whatever cost that might be.
One of the last Beatitudes was to be about, you are suffering for my sake, rejoice and be glad in it. It's not just suffering, it's suffering because you're following Jesus.
Yes.
I've heard a lot of people say it, this is my cross today because I have a cold or something like that.
Right.
That's not really what the cross means.
Unless you got the cold, because, and I'm not sure this really happens from a medical standpoint, because you were out in the rain demonstrating or doing a crosswalk or something.
You don't get a call from being wet.
Yeah, I know.
No, my mother would tell me I did.
Alright, usually we get a cold when germs are around and our immune system can't fight it off. Would that be correct, right?
Quite understand.
So,
The truth is these days in science, health is just as vague as all the rest of the truth these days.
so if that's the case, it could be true if we were burning the midnight oil, not taking care of ourselves, eating right, and not getting enough sleep, so our immune system gets compromised because we were doing the work. Price, but usually we get a cold because we're around people and it's going around and we get it, so to say that regardless of what we've been doing, oh, I have a cold, that's my cross to bear today. No, that's not what this passage means. Linda,
I don't know how to word this, but, okay, in the first two, it says his cross. Then the next three is take up their cross,
yes,
and then the next two, it takes up your cross.
yes,
And then the message will say that, so what,
thank you for bringing that up, because that's taking us back. And, well, the Greek actually says, let him, and I think isn't that what the King James says?
yes, they
Let
don't
him-
say take up his cross.
Yeah, let him take up his cross. So we're going back to the, up the top there. If any man, and remember, when the King James has, parentheses, that's not in the Greek, but. And this indefinite pronoun is masculine singular, so that's why they threw, man in there, because that's singular. If any man come after me, let him deny himself and take up his cross. Now, the reason that the new RSV and the NIV use themselves because it's not plural, it's singular. So instead of himself, they use themselves. They're trying to be inclusive. They think this means more than just a man or a male. We think this means, he said, well, his disciples were all men, but if we're applying this to anyone today, then we're gonna want that to be inclusive, possibly. But if we're sticking to the Greek, Jesus said to his disciples, if we're talking about the 12, then they were all men. But if we're talking about disciples in a larger way, anyone who was following Jesus at that time, we know there were women involved. But we can't get away from the fact that in the grammar, in the Greek, this is masculine singular. So the new RSV and the NIV and the Common English Bible all go to the plural themselves. And then, as I said earlier today, and as Linda just pointed out, the NLT and the CEV, to make it more inclusive, they go with you. So is it himself, themselves? Let him take up his cross, let them take up their cross, or you take up your cross. So that's
Even to add a fifth choice in there.
Go ahead.
In the message,
oh,
that you is not, it can be either singular or plural in the message.
right,
And so you have places where it's
yeah,
him, meaning that person over there, or them, whether that means anyone, several people over there, or an inclusive language meaning a singular person, or it means you, someone in this group, or you plural within this group, because someplace follower is singular, someplace followers is plural. And then in the
I see
message,
where you're going.
then in the message, they don't address whether it's singular or plural. It just means anybody within this group.
I think he's being intentional. So, yeah. So This is why it's good, I think, to compare the translations out. Sometimes when we do that, it might be more confusing. But I think they're doing this because they're trying to be more inclusive and and they're doing it more in a contemporary way. And then I think there is some thought behind it as to who is in the crowd. It's just males or are there more than male gender persons in the crowd? But and that's one. Now, someone was saying, well, I'm not gonna come to the next couple of classes because I don't wanna work with, and maybe that's why our class has been small when we talking about the languages, because some people wanna get to something else instead of just the differences of translations, but at the same time, I find it helpful to see what those differences are. And the last one. Well, did we get what Peterson, yeah, don't run from suffering, embrace it. Then the last one is, let him follow me, and they all say that, take up the cross, follow me, follow me, follow me, follow me, follow me, follow me. Follow me and I'll show you how. That's what Peterson says. He's saying, if anyone wants to come with me, don't be in the driver's seat. Or, yeah. Let me lead. Embrace suffering. Don't run from suffering, embrace it. Follow me, and I'll show you how to do these things. I'll show you how to take up your cross. I'll show you how to deny yourself. Show you how to follow me.
That connection, I just think back over when I was a kid, that the statement, they jump from the translation of suffering here and the paraphrase. And somebody this week sent me a note saying, you gotta read James, book of James, because suffering there is a test.
Yeah.
It's a faith test. You're going through this because you gotta get something out of it. Yeah. And I just, it comes back to that comment in the paraphrase here, I am. Now, what's that mean? You're not in the driver's seat, I am. And I think so much of, I understand God, it's in a relationship, it's
Right.
The dynamics of all that relational thing when it's not just God testing me.
Right.
So
Well, and I think that becomes a theological concern, and that is, do things happen to us as a test, or like when we're suffering, is it a test? Is it just like circumstance? Or is it not so much a test, but suffering, and can we deal with it in a good way, like if we're going through the grief process, can we go through that in a way, do that in a way in which we can still follow Christ? But to say, and I think it has been out there, and we see it in Proverbs too, that and we see it in the book of Job in the narrative form, where if someone experiences suffering, it's either a test or they've done something wrong. At least I try to stay away from that, because that just doesn't fit my theology. Bad things do happen to good people. I've said this before in this class, 20 to 30,000 children die every day due to starvation, preventable disease. They didn't do anything wrong except for being born. That wasn't wrong, it just happened, and so that, to me, that's more of a larger systemic thing on how the world works. We have enough food to feed everybody. We just don't distribute it well at all. And so politics gets into play. Whether it's our nation or other nations, we try to send food to some nations, but some of these third world nations are extremely corrupt. Food never gets to where it's supposed to go. So it's very complicated.
But to me, like, embrace this, don't run from the suffering.
Yeah.
Embrace it, sort of like. It seems to give us a charge to look at the inadequacies in our society and look at how we can change it. And realize, yes, we cannot have maybe a global impact, but we can have a local impact. And, you know, I'm thinking of the massive number of people that are now going out and demonstrating and expressing that, no, this is, we the Americans do not
Right.
support this.
Yeah, and that, you know, it has to start with us and at first glance, it just feels overwhelming. What can I as one person do? And I that hits me hard sometimes. And then I find, then I come around saying, well, look, I have to do something. So what is that? This can't sit by, whether it's, you know, what's going on in our country right now, or other things. Throughout my life, I've done certain things where just I needed to do because I thought things getting crazy. Now, did I make an impact? Maybe I did.
So it has a ripple effect from one person,
Just a hope.
yeah, to go to the next and the next.
Because people have influenced me when I get down on something like that, and then I usually run into someone who says, well, I did this, but my congressperson, or I did this and that, that helps me. It's me out of doldrums. Okay, I can do something. Because if we get complacent, because things are overwhelming, then that's not good either. Complacency is a problem.
About suffering,
Yeah,
I think the question is, do we suffer when other people suffer? We can't feel the suffering of the people, then we're not really following the way of Jesus, I think. I think he suffered when other people suffered. Just saw in the paper today that the administration is cutting off funds for the homeless coalition here in Lancaster.
yeah,
They've done a lot of other things too with church world service contracts and things like that. And that means that a lot of people are suffering that we may not be aware of. But we know they're suffering. And we're sending people back to a bad situation. So,
so when we have, I mean, there are, back to this quote, 20 to 30,000 children die each and every day due to starvation and preventable disease. There have been people and nations who have tried to eradicate extreme poverty, and we have made some strides. Human development goals and things of that nature we have. Now, current administration is interested in that, so our nation has pulled back from some of what other first world nations are trying to do to eliminate extreme poverty. But there have been steps. That's why I say from 20 to 30,000, because 10, 15 years ago, that number was 30,000, and now it's less, it's closer to 20. So there are some things that can be done. And if the problem starts at a national or global level, then we might need to fix it at.
But a lot of times you have to start at the local level. For instance,
get
like
there.
in Elizabethtown, the school board budget, no books. So one of the women that I'm friends with who's in the Freedom Readers group that I'm in, she started a GoFundMe page. So through Facebook, a lot of us are donating funds with the goal to raise $10,000. So there can be new books in the library because they have decided that's not necessary.
Right.
And to me, libraries enable your mind to expand outside of your
Sure.
sphere. Which then it could be why they don't want you to read.
What did the school board do?
Their budget they passed provided no money for library books for next year, K through 12. There will be no money to buy new library books. They also chose not to fill the 9 vacant teacher positions, amongst other things. Meanwhile, the high school, from what I understand, has major sewage problems to the point kids aren't going to the bathroom all day because of the stench.
Wow.
So they're focused on the banning of books versus the, you could say, environmentally safe conditions, and like, there's also sewage that backs up in the cafeteria. But yeah, they banned no new books.
There's no money to fix the sewage problem.
No,
Well,
they're not focusing on it.
They aren't, it's the school board that's so conservative that.
Well, I don't even know if they're conservative.
They're conservatives.
I don't think
They're not-
conservative. I think
They're doing it their way.
they're
Yeah.
doing it to destroy public education. And that is their goal, to destroy public education.
That's a national problem.
Right.
Yeah, that's a national problem, but when we have a sewage problem, that is safety. You know,
Yeah.
forget the books, your
Yeah,
viewpoint on all
because I
that,
know
but
Patty spoke to that at a school board meeting. It is a safety issue.
yeah, it's a safety issue, so
Wow.
we want our kids to be safe.
Has Bobby Kennedy weighed in on that yet? Maybe it's not. Maybe it's good to expose yourself to that.
Yeah.
Well, that's why the vaping happens too, because you see that counters the smell of the sewage.
That makes sense.
That's another problem.
There you go. Well, let's give everyone a vape apparatus and problem solved.
Right, they just ruin their lungs, they don't matter. And you get through high school.
Okay, let's turn over to Genesis 25:30. Not sure we're gonna have time to do this, but we can start. To get the full gist of this, we have to read Genesis 25. I think it's 29 to 34. Now, before I read that, I'll give you a little bit more context. You know this, you've heard the story, but Esau was Isaac's favorite because he was a man of the field, he was a hunter, that kind of thing. But Jacob was Rebekah's favorite because he was more of a domestic type. So you have Isaac who favors Esau and Rebekah who favors Jacob. But that's not so much important, except it sets the stage for this coming passage in 25, verses 29 to 34, that Esau is a man of the field and Jacob here is the shepherd. So that kind of it's their roles. So once when Jacob was cooking a stew, Esau came in from the field and he was famished. And Esau said to Jacob, let me eat some of that red stuff, for I'm famished. Therefore, he was called Edom, and if you look at the footnote, Edom means red. So he comes in from the field and says, give me some of that red stew, and then they nickname him Red. So then Jacob said, first, I'll give you some of this stew, but first, send me your birthright. And Esau said, well, I'm about to die. Of what use is a birthright to me? And Jacob said, swear to me first. So he swore to him and sold his birthright to Jacob. Then Jacob gave Esau bread and lentil stew. So apparently that's what he was cooking up there. And he ate and drank and rose and went his way. And then thus Esau despised his birthright. Now, what I'm interested in doing is looking at verse 30. Because this gets tricky. Because it's virtually impossible to translate verse 30 into English. We can do it though if we understand the context. For one, Jacob is cooking up a stew in 29, and then in verse 34, it's called a bean stew or a lentil stew. So we know it was some kind of legume stew. But I'm going to read to you from Hebrew, and you can follow English that I have down there. And Esau said to Jacob, no problem there, let me swallow from this red. That's what the Hebrew says. And we have it there. Now, this red is the stew. And in verse 29, that's what Jacob is cooking up the stew. And in 34, he gives to Esau, after they go through the birthright stealing, the birthright issue, then he gives him some bread. Jacob gives Esau some bread and this stew, or they call it lentil stew in verse 34. We know what that is, but he says, let me swallow from this red. So there's a sense of urgency with the verb. He just could have said, let me eat from this, or just fix me up a bowl. He doesn't do that. He says, let me swallow, let me devour that stew you're cooking. Have you ever seen someone, or maybe yourself, you haven't eaten in a couple of days? Can you put a plate of food before them? What do? Yeah, I mean, eat it as fast as they can. We should. You know, you're supposed to take your time if you haven't had food for a while. So we don't think Esau was just hungry, that he dismissed a meal. And he even says later on, what good is my birthright if I'm about to die? So there are some clues in this passage that Esau was more than just hungry from lack of one meal. He was hungry, don't get specific about it, but he was hungry because he was starving, or just maybe he hadn't eaten in a few days. So there's a sense of urgency. And we get that from the verb to swallow and to devour, but we also get it from the repetition of the word red. Because Esau could have said, give me some of that, let me devour some of that stew you're making, but he's urgent, he's anxious, he's he feels like maybe he is gonna die, I don't know, but let me devour from this red bread. And whenever something, a word like that is repeated side by side, it also stresses a sense of urgency or importance. So there are two things here. There's the verb and the repetition of red in the Hebrew that lets us know, if you know Hebrew, you know what you're reading here is there's a sense of urgency that some of the translations just don't bear out. Some do. Some pick it up, as we'll find, but some don't. When I was in seminary, I took Hebrew and then I started to take it to a level and I was able to read it. And so I would meet with the Old Testament professor once a week during lunch and we would read Hebrew. We were reading Genesis. We came to this passage and he said, Dave, I think in the contemporary expression, it would be like, you know, you're urgent, you're hungry, you're starving. It would be like just saying, hey, give me some of this damn red stuff. I mean, that's how we worked at it. And in our reading Hebrew to try to get sense of the urgency or the what this means. But if you read like the King James Version, it says, feed me, I pray, with that same red pottage. So it's, we talk about the King James being poetic. Well, here's a poetic flavor in the narrative. And the King James really ignores or dismisses altogether the urgency. So that's kind of where.
Even in the message, it doesn't, to me, looking at what you just said and then dropping down to the message. I don't get I mean, I'm starved and maybe that's from my modern day thing that I'm starved, meaning, yeah, hungry for the next meal.
Yeah,
I haven't
you say
missed
that,
several days. I mean, I don't
No,
get
he
the,
misses it.
yeah, I don't get the meaning, I'm starved to the point that
Yeah.
I feel I'm gonna die.
The one that I think gets it the most is the contemporary English version, the one right up from the message. So they take I'm famished and they put that at the beginning. And they translate it as I'm starving to death. Give me some of that red stew right now. So you get the urgency there. I'm starving to death, exclamation point. Give me some of that red stew right now, exclamation point. NLT doesn't do a bad job either. Where's the one that said quick? Oh yeah, NIV, let's go up to that. Quick. Let me have some of that red stew, I'm famished. So the quick, it's not in the Greek or the Hebrew, but it's letting you know that, and it doesn't even say let me eat, it says let me have. So they're using, for some reason, no one really wants to, someone does it here, where is it? The Common English Bible does it, and I'm becoming to like that translation more and more. I'm starving, let me devour some of this red stuff. That's the only translation here that I think translates that verb correctly. It means to devour, it means to swallow. But everyone else wants to say, feed me, or let me eat, or let me have. Give me, give me, give me. But the CEB says, let me devour. That's how that verb should be translated. It means to devour, it means to follow up. Ever give a dog, you can dogs have a different digestive system than we do, right? So they don't need to chew food like we do. Am I correct on that?
Yeah.
Okay, because we had,
They don't have flat molars to grind stuff up, they just rip it bare and swallow chunks.
Yeah.
Those cats.
so we did that with our border collie growing up. Take half a pancake, throw it to Tippy, gone. No chewing, just, and she wants the neck, she wants the other half, or as many pancakes as you give her. And let me swallow. I mean, that's what the verb is saying, let me swallow, let me devour.
My grandmother used the Dutch word fress instead of eating,
Yeah.
when you did that.
Yeah.
And if you're drinking like it means eat like an animal.
Yeah.
And south is the south and was that we drink like an animal. You could use if you're chugging water or if you're drinking too much liquor. But she would to distinguish eat and fress and drink and south. She would use the words because there was no English word for it.
Wolf it.
Yeah, wolf it down. Yeah, and that's an animal. Wolf's down, you say scarf sometimes, but wolf it down, treat like an animal. And with Hebrew being, in a culture that, in a culture that, is agrarian, they don't. So, I kind of went over this quickly, but I think we don't have to, we may go over it next time, but I don't think so. I'll try to move this on. But this gives you an idea. And what was interesting here is that it wasn't the word for word translations that were getting the urgency. It was really the thought for thought translations, because a word, if you just translate it word for word, you're not gonna get it. Or if you do it truly word for word, it's not gonna make sense. Let me swallow from this red bread. So you have to know the Hebrew verb, and you have to know what repetition, the role of repetition in Hebrew narrative is to get the full sense of urgency in this passage.
Footnote said that the Hebrews use this to taunt the Edomites, saying this is the origin of the Edomites, that they were kind of dull witted.
Yeah. That's interesting. All right, well, we're out of time. I don't want to keep you. Yeah, taking 5 minutes. Let's get going. Hey, John.
You're losing to members of the very popular discussion of their LGBTQ stuff. That room was packed.
Well, we knew this could happen.
Yeah, I know.
So, well, at least I know where everyone was.
Well, my honey came and she's reporting to me and then I'll report to her.
Yeah, some people do that.
Double dip.
Like, in the previous past. It says, the one printer was board. It came all red and covered.
Yeah.
That's red. Slave, the use of red.
Yeah.
Yeah, it finds its way through the whole narrative. And it comes up again here. Then the hairy stuff comes up later. When Jacob tries to pass himself off as Esau to get Isaac's blessing. And he puts animal skins on him because Isaac can't see. You see, I want to feel, oh, well, you feel like my son Esau, but you sound like my son Jacob. And so this is a narrative, and there's some irony and there's some humor in it. In the story, the way it plays out.
Yeah, it's a duck.
But you have to pay attention to word plays
There was
and
Italian
and
break
how
down
bread is used and how the word
in
hairy.
Lancaster. And I walked by
But
and,
and
you know,
they
and I
need
said,
it also,
Dog.
apparently means red.
Yes.
well, no,
Well, yeah,
the rest of them say it means red. I go,
Yeah.
well, I remember.
and it does. It says, give me some of this, eat them, eat 'em."
handbook was coming
I mean,
in because.
That's,
You're good.
it was, and then they called him Edom, which they say sounds
But,
to be bad. Well, it is.
Oh, she's so adorable.
Give me some of this red, therefore he was called Edom.
It's her second.
And most people put in parentheses, well, Edom means red. And that's the word that was used when Esau said, you can just let me swallow from this red bread. So when you read in Hebrew, it's pretty clear, but then how do we translate it into English?
Thank you, Dave.
Yeah, all right.
David, I have two of Esau and Jacob's parents. The dynamics there.
There.
They're certainly
Okay,
there.
I thought of getting it.
Already.
Right.
You get each kid.
Yeah, their favoritism, I think, also sets up this tension between the two. Isaac favors Esau,
81.
Rebecca favors Jacob.
40 basically
And then-
international.
Okay.
Then Jacob really wants to be the firstborn. Maybe he's okay with his mother paying him special attention, but he probably really wants to pay attention of himself. So there's jealousy. And then if you read the story of Jacob, once he goes to marry Rachel and
To the
Leah,
police, she goes, well,
Uh,
find out. You tell
he's
them.
not really the domestic, type. He could be a worker too.
I mean, we walked around Centennial Park when the neighbors, I mean.
And so they really leave that domestic
Uh.
element of Jacob behind. It only serves the purpose to set up the tension between Jacob and Esau. Then that domestic flavor of Jacob is left behind,
So much
and then,
did it so that it was fascinating.
It almost sounds like they're
No, we did that, we did that other thing.
from Magnan versus modern human.
Yeah.
And the issue that we know well now, that they were crossbreeding and there were some hairy, thick-headed people. And there continue to be hairy, thick-headed people.
Yeah, oh, God.
yeah. All right.
Thank you, David.
You're welcome.
Now, David,
Now, Craig.
did you have more than one brother?
Yes, I have an older brother.
Is the one that you lost, was he the one that was in Europe? Didn't you talk about a brother that was in Europe or someplace?
My cousin.
A cousin.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, my cousins in Europe, so I had to call them. But and in fact, they're coming over for the funeral, but I think they were gonna come over sometime this summer anyway, and they said, we'll come over earlier, and then they'll have all the visits that they were gonna do.
Yeah.
So, but I'm so glad they're coming.
Yeah. It's always good when a family can be together,
Yeah,
despite what the reason.
yeah, well, and I say, well, some people say, well, it's unfortunate we only get together these times. I said, well, yeah, but we better,
Yeah.
because we need to, so,
Oh, we were sorry to hear about that.
yeah, it's tough. We're struggling and we're gonna.
It was unexpected.
It had done, some pretty nasty, it basically had killed him before he knew it.
Yeah.
And so he went into hospital to die, and
Wow.
no one saw that coming.
No, that's horrible.
So it happens. It's really hard.
Oh, yeah,
We're struggling. Yeah, I've been in kind of slow motion the last couple of weeks, and I've been telling people lately, I'm just overwhelmed.
Oh, yeah.
I'm overwhelmed with emotions. And then I'm overwhelmed, with talking to people about it. Then I'm overwhelmed by the things the normal things I would do because I can't do
Your
them.
focus is.
Yeah, my focus isn't there. I'm going to, I'm in slow mode. And it should be, you're right. But, but I also know, because my dad died in a similar way 20 years ago. So I also know this is gonna be hard for her. But over time and with work, I call it grief work, but if we go through the grief process in a healthy way, then we will be okay. But it's not going to be. So people say, well, how are you doing? To say, I'm not doing well.
I won't say how you're doing, but I will say we'll try to support you as we can.
There you go. Okay.
Thanks, Greg.
All right. Hola. All right.